Okay. Um, I'll maybe edit some video over this, but I'm not exactly sure yet. Uh, so I guess today is more, well, yeah, I guess let's start with hello. I am the Loresharer. Um, the point of this channel, when I made it, was to share stories, narrate stories, because one of my favorite things is to read and learn about stories. I love collecting them. I'm called the librarian by my friends sometimes, but like that's not important. What is important is that this channel is meant to be about stories. Um, and it's about the things that unfurl because of those stories. Implications of stories is why I love to read. Um, all of the potential that a world can have as you go through and you read it is my favorite thing that you can possibly have in a story that makes you think about what if. That is what makes a wonderful story. That is what makes a story valuable to me. So, going back to the idea of what this channel is about, it's meant to be about me sharing thoughts on stories. It's me sharing lore. It's about me sharing what I find interesting. And through that, I'm sharing bits of myself from me to you. And so far on this channel, we haven't had a proper discussion at all. But you've been able to see little bits and pieces that I've shared of the lore of who I am. My first video, I believe, was me recreating the Kingdom of Scala, which is it's a reconstructed disaster site of my favorite D&D character that I have ever played at the beginning of said campaign. Him and his country, he wasn't king yet, but that happened later. He was just a guard there, and he worked in the castle. And all of a sudden, a terrace that was deep under the earth came up from the ground and destroyed, wiped out the city. And that city happened to have something very particular in it, which I don't care to go into because that story is mine. And it's the story of my D&D group. And that makes it very special to me. But anyway, because of that, the city was destroyed, and years later, he becomes king. They have a massive battle there. He becomes king, gets his country back, ta-da, everything's there. And so, I created my visual representation of what that story looks like, based off of what I had been told about where the capital was, I found a map that I thought fit that. And so I recreated the capital as per my ideology, as per my head lore. And then after that, we started going into Portal Reloaded, which is obviously a continuation of Portal 2. It's after the co-op, you find the vault, spoilers, and then the story ends. And so they've gone through and they created the the Portal Reloaded pack, which is about time travel and whatnot, and we're almost finished with that. I've messed up the videos here and there and lost the audio, but we're nearly at the end of that, and through me going through that, I've sort of shown that Portal was one of my all-time favorite games. I absolutely loved that story. I loved the mystique of the world. I loved how dark the hidden story of Aperture was. I loved all the hidden bits and pieces of lore hidden throughout there, like, where does, like, how do they all survive, which there's bits and pieces, as said, and everybody knows, usually through the Ratman, but that's not what we're here about. And so as that comes to the end, we're sort of shifting over into Factorio, which Portal 2 used to be my favorite game, and I think for the last several years, Factorio has been my favorite game, which I've shown bits and pieces of. Not all the videos are even watched, but one of my videos took off. It seemed like it hit a few people's recommended page, which was sort of cool. Just coming back to this channel, I only do it once every couple of weeks, and then one day I come back and I saw that I had freaking 100 views on this shitty little video about, hey, this is my trash factory. It's the first factory I've ever actually properly tried in. I want to actually beat it this time. So, near the end of the game, after messing around for like 20 hours, I finally start the game back up. Start the factory up because I finally gotten the science factory module. It's finally running. And then I beat the game. And nobody cared about that. But that was very special to me. I absolutely adored Factorio as a kid. It's a game that works very well with how my mind works. I have pretty bad ADHD, so my thoughts are just everywhere all the time. So I absolutely love a game where it doesn't just funnel you into doing one particular thing. If you get bored in Factorio, you can just say, fuck it, I'll work on this absolutely insignificant piece that will do nothing. And fuck. It might only matter for half an hour in a 40-minute game, but you've spent 3 hours on it. Just because. And then you get that little piece to work. That little piece that you were missing. And you feel so proud. And so, on the flip side of that, my ADHD also allows me to hyper-focus on a task. It's not that it allows me per se, it's more along the lines of it absolutely railroads me from thinking about anything I have to onto thinking about a particular thing. Which, it's sort of painful. There have been many nights where you just sort of... I couldn't sleep as a kid because my mind would be constantly roaring with one particular insignificant piece of information, and it would just focus on that, and it would scream over and over and over again. And I call that looping, because my thoughts are very linear. There's not a lot of change. There's a lot of branches off of that main path, but that main path is going to be very consistent. And so, due to the hyper focus, the second I try to get off of whatever I'm focused on, it just snaps back due to the ADHD. And then you think about it all over again. You could have just spent 2 hours thinking about it, but you tried to focus on something different, so now you have to start the whole process over again. And you're stuck in this loop for days, which is part of why I don't upload very often. I'm very impulsive. I just give into whatever urges I have, for the most part, which is problematic. But the biggest thing that can help me sort of focus, break away from whatever, is a good story. Which leads us back to the channel. Stories are very important to me. They have always been my way of getting away from this world, going into somebody else's world, where there's fantastical ideas about what can and can't be. You've got an infinite number of choices, possibilities. In a story, there are no limits apart from what the author has put in place. So, as you go through and you read a story, anytime you have to put down that book, you can let your mind wander and build a what if. What if you had a character that was there in this story, and you gave them such and such an ability, or power, or mindset, or rules, or personality? How would that change it? And then, in the next chapter, or book, or installment, whenever that comes out, you say, okay, that wouldn't be allowed, or maybe it would be allowed. It doesn't entirely matter. You just sit there and you think about the story. You think about what the story you have made, how that would be changed by the new information that you've been given. Think about what if. And that's what I love about stories the most. You can think and think and think, and until the next book comes out, you are the god there. You are all that has to be said. You are the only person that has to have anything run past them. For all intents and purposes, you are the only person that matters. You, what has been, and what can be. And you fall in love with that story. It becomes a craving. And over time, as you read more, as you read hundreds of stories, as you read thousands, as I've done. Every once in a while, we'll find an absolute gem. Somebody that hasn't left it to a what if, or how does this work? You'll get somebody who will set rules, but still leave them just vague enough to where you can have a wonderful story. You get to think about all the bits and pieces that could be, have been. You get to create your own world. I, at heart, am a reader. I've tried writing, but I can't really come up with ideas. I'm very good on elaborating on them, on elaborating what if. I'm very good at that, but I'm not good at creating an idea from scratch. So a lot of the works that I've tried to make are sort of splinters of somebody else's idea, which is why we have cliches. They're there to help us write stories. They help them make sense. They're there to give us a path. But anyway, a lot of the stories I write are just fragments, somebody else's story that I've completely removed and created a new character. The Sacrificed is one such story. There is a book series by Drew Hayes called Superpowers. And it's about what if all superheroes, all supers, didn't actually have control over their power. And as the story goes on, you'll learn about why or why not. And so I won't spoil that. But anyway, my idea for The Sacrificed was, what if you have somebody who's strong, very strong, perhaps even the strongest. And it's sort of implied at the beginning of the story about why religion fails in this world. It's once these supers are revealed to the world, it's like, okay, well, clearly all the gods were just supers, trying to pull one over on the regular people. But what if you had somebody that was actually that strong, actually as strong as a god, but just in one particular facet? What would that do to them? What if you had a super, and his core ability was to create copies? Perhaps not copies, but what if his ability was to create and summon gods from another world? Now, a lot of the what ifs I create, I have to make them hermits, because I enjoy seeing what would happen on the high end of power. I love power fantasy. Most people do. That's why it's a popular genre in anime, stories, well, yeah, video games. People inherently love the idea of having absolute power. But also, in order to not mess with the world, you have to make them a hermit. So, what I tend to do when I create my stories is create some obscenely overpowered character and think about how they would go about solving the world's problems. So, going back to The Sacrificed, we've got a character who summons gods. Well, he can't control his power. So, what happens? Well, as a kid, nobody else can see the gods because he himself is the contact point between these universes. So only he is able to see them. Only he is able to channel their power, but he can't control it, so he can't let other people see the effects of his power. Okay, so somebody might think he's schizophrenic because he's talking to himself. He's knowing things that he shouldn't be. He is able to do things that other people can't. It's a fairly logical conclusion. You've got a kid, he's not growing up properly. Maybe there's a mind problem there. Well, later on the lines, people see him do things that a normal person can't do, so what happens? He's a super. He has powers. That means he has to be able to control them. Well, he can't, so now he's empowered. Down the line, he gets a treatment that lets him control his power. Well, now people can see the gods. If they are in close relationship with the anchor, they are able to be given permission to also be a piece of the contact point between the universes. Sorry, I knocked my table there. So, blah, 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 blah. People begin to understand him. They understand how much pain he's in. Because at one point, let's say, because he can't control his power, he can't tell the gods to not go on a rampage at being stuck in this other world. So one of them is a peaceful god. They love people. She creates paradise. And another one of the gods is angry. He is angry with existence. All he wants is to speed up the death of everything. And so, the first time he is uncontrollably summoned, kills everything within miles. What happens to that child? Well, the government would take him in, they'd put him in some hidden facility to either try and do research, or they would attempt to kill him. Well, let's say, what if his power is too strong, which makes sense. He's using too much, and within the rules of the superpowered universe, there is a consequence to using powers. Every power. For some of them, it's a physical exchange. And some of them, it's a mental exchange. So, because this person is an anchor point, a contact point, they're under physical pressure. Anytime they channel power, they're becoming the crushing point between two universes, between a multiverse. So anytime that power is being moved across, then in a regular body, it's being crushed with all the force they are emitting. So, he's now on a list. He has a chronic condition of death. Well, good news is, the first god he ever summoned is kind. She's a creator. She builds paradise. So, she does all she can. Keep him safe. She heals him the best she can. But it's still not enough. Sooner or later, he will die because he can't control his power. He can't make sure she's always there. So, as he gets older, he gets more and more sick. And then he gets the procedure, letting him control his power. So then he begins to lock away the second god. The god of war, god of death, god of killing, the god of the end, the god of entropy. He puts extreme shackles on him any time he comes into this universe. Well, down the line, say he dies. We learn, I think it's in the third book, that all powers modify your body in order to deal with your power. And based on the fact that he has a terminal condition due to his power, that means that his body hasn't been properly. His body wasn't properly converted to handle his power. So, what if his death wasn't actually death? What if that was just his body shutting down so that he can use the creation of the creator and the killing of entropy? What if it can use the power of both of those gods to reformat the body, make it stronger? So, he's not actually dead. He's just in a coma for a long time. The world has changed by the time he wakes up. He's lost a lot. His kid is now older. His wife has been split apart from the God that she loves, the God that she is. And so she has begun to corrupt. She can no longer go back to her paradise. He comes back, and his body is stronger now. It can handle the contact point, at least for a bit, perfectly. But the age of a universe is very long, and that is his power. So, what if his body made it so that he can last long enough to see the death of all of the universes of the gods that he summons? What if it forces him to be the contact point until the end of all of their times? What would that do to him? Well, in my opinion, the goddess of creation has been forced to watch too much death. The goddess of paradise. She might eventually, as she's forced to watch our mortal world, she might eventually give up, seeing that she can't protect everything. Because that's what she's always done. It's what she's always tried to do. So, she gets extreme depression, and one day decides she doesn't want to live anymore. So, she passes along her power So the one who will last, the one who is forced to last. She passes it along to Pantheon. So now, Pantheon, the center of all the gods, the anchor. He is now forced to look after his wife's work, after his wife's paradise. And he's angry. He no longer believes in a world that survives. However, he is still forced to live on. He must continue to be the anchor. And as time goes on, more gods quit. They all decide to die. Till there is only the god of ending left. What if Pantheon's power is circular? What if all of those universes will exist as long as he wants them to, as long as he needs them, as long as he assigns value to the creations of the gods that made them? That would mean, in my story, that Pantheon must exist until he hates all of the gods that he ever created. However, all of those gods are based on everything that he loves, anything that he desires, which means that the more that he hates the world, the closer he gets to another of the gods. He gets closer to the second god, the god of entropy, which means that he will begin to accept him. Which means that at a certain point, after all of the other gods have gone, he now loves the one that will be around the longest, because entropy always exists. But because he still lives, the other worlds haven't collapsed yet. So that means there are billions and billions of lives across the entire multiverse hidden within Pantheon. And his life is a sacrifice so that theirs goes on. Thus he is called the sacrificed. He is the one that will exist until the end of times. He sacrificed himself so that his wife's work will live. He lives for billions and billions of years to the end of the universe till all power has died. And since he has lived so long, his body is still making changes. He has a literal god of entropy on his side. His body won't collapse like the rest of the universe will. So, at one point, after the end of everything else, there will be a man floating in the abyss of space. At what point does he sacrifice everything just so that he can have piece of death. This is who I am. That is how I look at a story. I take a story, then I say, what if? And I do that with every story that I enjoy. Maybe not to that depth. Maybe it's just what if Harry Potter could, I don't know, what if that power could be reproduced, recreated? What if it wasn't his mother's love for him? Because that's not very scientific, which, suspense of disbelief, it's a world of magic, it doesn't have to make sense. But what if it wasn't his mother's love that allowed him to live the killing curse? What if it could be applied to people? What if it was some wonderful material? Or what if it was some combination of spells? So what if the killing curse became irrelevant? I think that was one of the first what ifs I ever asked. Mostly because Harry Potter was the story that got me into reading. So that continued. In 3rd grade, I read Harry Potter. That's the only book I really remember, or book series really, that I really remembered reading for that. I got everybody in my grade to read it too, because they saw this quiet kid who, well, I wasn't quiet back then. They saw this loud, rambunctious kid who hated school, who hated everything about it, because he couldn't focus in class, he couldn't do anything. What was so good about this book that he was willing to quiet down, sit at the edge of class, which he always tried to be in the center of back then? What was so good about this book that it made this person completely change? So everybody in my grade started to read Harry Potter. And I think that was the first time that I witnessed the power of a story. It completely changed my identity from a stupid idiot on the edge of class, messing around in the class, never doing homework, never paying attention in class, to being somebody different. I could be somebody in a world where you didn't have to do math, you didn't have to know how to spell something. Shit, you didn't even have to know what a rubber duck was. All you had to do was believe in the story. Believe in the author's vision of a creation. And so, from that point on, I always loved to share the stories that I read. Anytime anybody needed a book recommendation, I began to collect them. In 3rd grade, it was Harry Potter. In 4th grade, it was the uh, 39 Clues, I believe is the name of it. 39 Clues and Percy Jackson, because it was just that first series at that point, the Percy Jackson and the Lightning Thief through Percy Jackson and the Last Olympians. That was all that had been written by Riordan, I believe. That was all that had been written at that point. Then I had just finished off the Last Olympians. Then, like 2 months later, after I'd gone through 39 Clues, then the Heroes of Olympus started to drop. So I went through, I read those, and I still loved it. So now, by the end of 4th grade, I had found 3 series that I absolutely loved. Harry Potter, Clues, and Percy Jackson. And it was at that point that I began to realize I love stories. And so, from then on, I began to read. And by the time I was in 6th grade, I was reading a novel a day. Full 200-300 page novel in a day. And I already hated school. I always had. So it didn't bother me to skip class to read. I mean, I never actually skipped. I was in the classroom, but it didn't mean I was paying attention. Luckily, I'm smart enough to where I can passively absorb the information I needed just from being in the class. So, if teacher called on me, I could just give back the answer that they needed after thinking about it for a while. I still hated being there. And instead I loved being in the book, in the story. So, this should give you a brief idea, a vague glimpse at who I am. I am one of those mythical people who has an addiction to stories. They can get high off of one. They get withdrawal after an ending. And all of this led to a cranky person who hated the world around them and loved to escape to somewhere else. And just recently, as in the last couple of years, primarily because of COVID, I've started to read online. And so it went from me being alone in a corner of a library, being the librarian's freaking favorite person in the world, for coming in, ordering 3 books, and then returning 2 of them the next day, and getting another 3 books. Went from being the person that they love to being not in libraries anymore. I now read online. And through that, I saw that there are more people out there like me than I thought. And so, I guess a part of me wanted to capture that in this channel, to try and help people see stories the way that we do. People who are addicted to stories. So, there's not exactly place for people like us in this world. In the world that we live in, it's a very, you go to work, you do your job, you go home, you raise your kids, whatever. But there's not really jobs for storytellers anymore. Closest thing we have to them are comedians, which I'm not particularly funny. Every once in a while I'll get a hell of a joke out, but it's never intentional. I can't do it on command like they can. But because of how much I withdrew into the worlds of fantasy and sci-fi, I lost a great deal of my social skills. I'm sort of stuck in that 4th grade level of, you're here, you've got humor-ish for back then. I can notice things about people. I'm very good at it. It's just sort of applying story analysis in reverse. I can take apart what personality somebody has, but I don't know how to deal with it like a normal person. And so there's not really a place for people like that in this world. And so I guess the point of this channel was to go through and make a place for that. Make a place for me to share stories, to channel the obsession. So, in the first few videos I made, I didn't really get my audio set up properly at all, so you couldn't hear the story I was narrating over the Rodina clip. You could hear the clip over Kingdoms and Castles, but it's sort of trash. Just sort of me meandering through my thoughts. There were Risk of Rain clips where just sort of mess around, creating a story. Because sitting in the void fields for 2 hours is a story. Not that anyone would care about it, but it's a story to me. And so I uploaded it. I uploaded my story of my first factory that I've ever won on Factorio. And so, I guess going forward, we'll still be playing games every here and there, but I think I'm gonna take a shot at narration. I might just make a go at it. Now, I'm probably not going to be consistent, as shown by my upload schedule. It's really only once every few weeks, but it's something that interests me. And it's not anything that really interests the outside world. So, I'll share the secrets. I'll share the lore of who I am, of my life, my outlook. I'll share what makes the world worth living in to me. I will be the Loresharer. So, I don't think I'm gonna do a let's talk about like this very often, where it'll just sort of be a rant about one thing for, looks like it's gonna be about 55-ish minutes here. I don't think I'm gonna do this very often, but it was something that I knew that I wanted to have on the channel, which is why I created a ghost playlist for it. And this is probably going to be the first video for it. Not exactly sure what I'm going to do with the background for it, because I don't want it to just be blank. I'll probably toss something up. I've got games on my computer. I can record something in the background and toss it up. But yeah, I don't think I'm gonna do this very often. This was sort of meant to be about the channel and about what I'm looking to do with it, as well as an introduction as to who I am and to sort of how I choose to present stories. So I think I'm gonna release this, and then I think I'm gonna start doing stories. So that should hopefully be out within a few days. I'll be doing some book reviews. I have a few of them that I wanted to get around to. Mostly to be analysis videos. I had one a few months ago that I really wanted to do, and then I got sidetracked, and then it was weeks later, and I sort of forgot exactly how much I hated it. I forgot about how much I wanted to deal with it, so I haven't gotten around to it. Because the passion wouldn't be there. But I don't think I'm gonna dig it back out again, because I didn't enjoy it. But we might make a short video on it. I have a few short stories that I've chosen that I'm gonna be reading pretty soon here. And the gaming videos, those will still continue. Those probably won't be the focus of the channel like they had been for the last few months. But we're getting closer to my vision of what this was meant to be. We're not as removed. So I've got the channel symbol. Maybe I'll make a character for, or, well, hire somebody. I can't draw for shit. Maybe I'll hire a friend or something to draw me a character to sort of narrate as one of those, like, low budget animated characters on YouTube that you see here and there. But yeah, that was my this is my introduction into who I am, what I want to do. So I'm gonna call the video here, and hopefully as we continue, this won't be as awkward. It's not gonna be as meandering, hopefully, and less ums. But we'll see. We'll make this together, and if people still care at all, we'll keep on doing it. I'll take a shot at it for a while, and then probably in about a year or so, we'll come back, take a look at it, and see if I want to drop the channel. I know I have a few views now, mostly because of that video that hit the recommended page, but that's because of the recommended, so it's not because people actually care. So that's the plan. And we'll call the video here, and I'll see you guys next time.